From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
This is a president that is acting like a dictator. This is a president who is ignoring the rule of law and siding with lawbreakers over the citizens of this country and the citizens of this state, while damage is being conducted every single day.
Is the Tea Party becoming the ruling party of Arizona? Is Arizona the new model for the GOP? We'll speak with journalist Ken Silverstein of Harper's. We'll also go to Utah, where Latino immigrants are under siege this week after an anonymous group distributed a list of 1,300 immigrants they say are undocumented. It includes their names, addresses, phone numbers, some Social Security numbers, and the due dates of women who are pregnant. The list, sent to law enforcement and the news media, demands those named be deported immediately. Then, will climate change make these heat waves longer and hotter? And we'll speak to the Indian scientist on melting Himalayan glaciers and climate change deniers.
And you say the glaciers are not melting and everything is hunky-dory and there's no problem. These are the people who are really undermining the whole movement of this mitigation and adaptation.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. BP has again suspended a pressure test of a containment cap placed over the breached well in the Gulf of Mexico shortly after receiving government approval to proceed. Work crews began tests on Wednesday until the leak was found on one of the caps. The testing has raised hopes of plugging the gusher, but National Incident Commander Thad Allen urged caution.
It would be terrific news if we could shut in the well, but I don't think we can say that. I think it needs to be an overabundance of caution, and I don't want to get anybody's hopes up that we can shut this well in until we get the empirical pressure readings that we need to have, do a seismic survey of the seafloor, and try and understand as well as we can the condition of the wellbore and the casings.
Biologists, meanwhile, say oil has smeared hundreds of pelicans and terns on Raccoon Island, the largest seabird nesting area along the Louisiana coastline. The birds haven't been counted among the government's list of oiled birds. An estimated 10,000 birds are said to nest on Raccoon Island. BP, meanwhile, has acknowledged its share of the oil spill cleanup costs could be partially offset by lower taxes. In an interview with Bloomberg News, a BP spokesperson said the company plans to deduct the amount it spent on cleanup efforts and that it's likely to do the same for compensation payments to Gulf Coast residents. Based on its tax rate last year, BP could deduct almost $20 billion in taxes should its cleanup obligations reach $60 billion, as some have projected. The U.S. military says 8 American troops have been killed in several attacks over a 24-hour period in Afghanistan. 45 international troops have died in Afghanistan this month, following the record 103 killed in June. The Iranian nuclear scientist Shahram Amiri has returned to Iran just days after surfacing in Washington following a year-long disappearance. Amiri's whereabouts had been a mystery until he appeared in the Pakistani embassy in Washington asking for assistance to return home to Iran. On Wednesday, Amiri renewed claims he was abducted by CIA and Saudi Arabian intelligence agents.
I was abducted in Medina in front of my hotel by U.S. and Saudi intelligence agents. Then I was transferred to an unknown location in Saudi Arabia. They injected anesthetic drugs into me. They took me to the U.S. on a military plane. During my stay in the first 2 months, I was subjected to heaviest psychological and mental tortures by CIA interrogators.
The U.S. claims Amiri defected and provided valuable intelligence about Iran's nuclear activities before changing his mind. The Washington Post is reporting he was paid $5 million under a secret government program for Iranian defectors. A Libyan aid ship has docked in Egypt after the Israeli Navy prevented it from reaching the Gaza Strip. The ship set sail from Greece last week, carrying over 2,000 tons of aid in an attempt to break the Israeli naval blockade. But on Wednesday, 8 Israeli vessels surrounded the ship and ordered its diversion to Egypt. A leading Rwandan opposition figure has been brutally murdered. The Democratic Green Party's vice president, Andre Kagwa Risarika, was found nearly decapitated shortly after his disappearance on Tuesday. The party's president, Frank Habineza, announced the news.
About his last meetings with some people. So we exchanged that with the police and the army. And then afterwards, when we reached here last night, this morning, we got confirmation from his sister that they found the body. So I talked to the brother, he's called Antoine Haguma, who went to the scene and actually identified the body of his brother, Kagwa. And he found that the head was cut, almost cut off the body. It is just a small thing remaining. It is a terrible death. So afterwards, the police has now taken the body to mortuary.
The Democratic Green Party has been banned from Rwanda's upcoming elections. In a speech months before his death, Rugozereka criticized the government of the Rwandan President Paul Kagame.
We can't continue to live like this. The Rwandan population has lived in fear since 1960, up until now. It is time now to change this life and for people to live in peace. That is what we've come to do in our political party.
The Obama administration's unveiled plans to reduce the U.S. nuclear arsenal by between 30% to 40% by 2021. The move would cut the U.S. arsenal to between 3,000 and 3,500 warheads, a target critics say remains too high. The administration's plan also calls for spending nearly $175 billion by 2030 on new weapons and facilities, as well as modernizing existing weaponry. The Washington Post is reporting the nation's major non-financial firms have reserves of some $1.8 trillion, around a quarter more than they had when the recession struck. Despite the higher earnings, most companies don't plan to increase hiring. In a survey of over 1,000 top executives by Duke University and CFO Magazine last month, nearly 60% said they don't expect to bring staffing back to pre-recession levels until 2012 or later. This despite forecasts of a 12% rise in earnings and a 9% boost in capital spending over the next year. New figures show more than 1 million Americans are likely to lose their homes to foreclosure this year. According to Realty Track, close to 528,000 homes were foreclosed in the first 6 months of the year, well on pace to surpass last year's 900,000 repossessed homes. The 1 million mark is about 10 times the historical average for foreclosures per year. The Obama administration's appointed a former insurance executive and leading opponent of the public option to help implement the new health care law. Liz Fowler was a former executive for the insurance giant WellPoint before serving as chief health advisor to Senate Finance Committee Chair Max Baucus. Fowler headed the group of staffers who helped draft the health care reform law that excluded the public option. The tobacco giant Philip Morris is under scrutiny for using child labor in remote areas of Kazakhstan. In a new report, Human Rights Watch says it's documented at least 72 cases of child workers harvesting tobacco on farms that supply a Philip Morris-owned factory. The children were as young as 10 years old. Harvesting tobacco would be a particularly dangerous task for children because of the exposure to high levels of nicotine. Philip Morris says it's adopted sweeping changes in response to the report's findings. A former New York police officer who was videotaped tackling a bicyclist has escaped a prison sentence. The then officer, Patrick Pogan, violently knocked the cyclist off his bicycle during a critical mass bike ride in 2008. Pogan then charged the cyclist with attempted assault, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. Pogan was convicted in April of lying about the incident in his police complaint. He had faced up to 4 years in prison, but has been on a conditional discharge. And a U.S. judge is deciding today on whether to uphold a 28-month prison term for the civil rights attorney Lynn Stewart or sentence her to 30 years. Stewart was found guilty in 2005 of distributing press releases on behalf of her jail client, Sheikh Omar Abdelrahman, also known as the Blind Sheikh. Prosecutors had sought a 30-year sentence, but Stewart was sentenced to 2.5 years after the judge rejected the prosecutor's argument that she threatened national security and ruled there was no evidence her actions caused any harm. But in November, a 3-judge appeals court panel ordered the trial judge to review the sentence, calling it strikingly low. On the eve of the new sentencing, hundreds of people rallied near the federal courthouse in Manhattan in a show of support for Lynn Stewart. Stewart's daughter, Brenna Stewart, said her mother is being targeted for her political views.
Faces the possibility of 30 years, and it's never been heard of for upper court to tell a lower court re-sentence. it's just amazing how they're targeting her because of the unpopular clients that she represented in her lifetime. You know, she has 50 years of representing everybody and is repaid by being put in jail.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.